Glad you're streaming with us. America will stand by your side. That was the main message Secretary of State Antony Blinken gave Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky during a surprise visit to Kyiv today.
Our joint task is to secure Ukraine's sustained and permanent strategic advantage so that Ukraine can not only deliver on the battlefield today, but deter and defend against future attacks. As President Biden said, we want Ukraine to win, and we're committed to helping you do it.
The visit comes as Ukraine struggles to hold back a rapidly advancing Russian offensive near its second largest city, Kharkiv. Our foreign correspondent, James Longman, is there. So, James, Blinken said that the American military aid is on its way to Ukraine. The question is, how much of a difference is it going to make on the battlefield?
Yeah, Kira, this was an interesting speech. There was actually quite a long delay with Blinken coming out, and one imagines that's because his aides and he were kind of poring over the language because he had to really walk a fine line here. On the one hand, we heard all the things that you usually hear from a senior American visitor to Ukraine about how they were standing strong with the Ukrainians. You are not alone, he said. But on the other, it was also about laying out a framework for what a Ukraine of the future might look like without quite so much American support. He said, and this was, I think, was probably the language that they were checking over, it was about how American support should transition to more sustainable levels. This was an address not just for Ukraine, not just for the Ukrainian people, but very much for people back home in the United States. An election year where support for Ukraine and the war here, the amount of money that's going into it, will be a salient issue. America needs to find a way to extricate itself from this war, whilst at the same time ensuring that the security of this region can be sustained. He did also talk about NATO. I think strong support for Ukraine joining NATO. That might have been some of the bartering that was going between both the Ukrainian and the American teams as well. But it was also talk about how they wanted to make sure that their military could stand alone, that there could be better industrial infrastructure here to support weapons manufacturing and also an economic plan as well, because we know that Ukraine has dealt with corruption. So it was a wide-ranging speech, but interesting that this was the top ranking diplomat from the United States, not the defense secretary. This was much more than just, yes, you've got military aid. This was about a way to figure out a plan for Ukraine going into the future above and beyond this conflict, which, as we know, is in a very, very serious position for Ukraine right now. Kira?
Well, so far, thousands of Ukrainians have been forced to evacuate their homes in Kharkiv. So what more do we know about the fighting in particular?
Yeah, it's getting pretty serious. We heard just a few hours ago of a strike on an apartment building there. At least 20 people were injured. But essentially what you've got is this enormous Russian force which has been camped out on that border just north of Kharkiv, which is Ukraine's second city. Something like 50,000 Russian troops, the Ukrainians think. 30,000 of them, they say, are engaged in this incursion in some way. They've taken a number of villages. 9 was the number we had, but that number may have gone up. 7,000 people have been displaced. But you're talking about a city of more than 1 million people, which is now watching as Russian troops are bearing down on it. We might be in the situation where that city has Russian tanks rolling into its outskirts. And if that happens, that will cause huge panic in the city, a major setback for Ukraine as they have to pull out troops from other parts of their front line in order to support that region, but they're already overstretched, and the delay in aid has already made them weaker in a number of areas. So this is a really dangerous situation that Ukraine is in right now, Kira.
James Longman, we will continue to cover it, of course. Thank you.